called the Latino strikers. Mind if I say this, but Marcos actually could not read and write English language, right? And so when we were going out to the boycott, this is after the big strike, and we were all getting arrested, and we knew that we couldn't win through the strike. They kept putting us in jail. So that's when we sent people out to go to the boycott. And so when Cesar was asking people where they wanted to go, and he was writing the names on the board, right? And then, so Marcos volunteered to go on the boycott. But he thought he was going to Barstow. But he ended up going to Boston.
No difference.
So he was very surprised when he got to Boston. It was very, very cold. And here he is. And I've told the story many times because it really shows that the power of people. So Marcos ends up in Boston. What do you have in Boston? Harvard University, you've got Yale University, Boston University, Brandeis, all these great, and Cambridge, all these great universities. And here is a farm worker who can't read or write. And you know what? Marcos organized all of those people from Harvard and Yale and all these people to do his ticketing, to write his leaflets. He was the first one to get his city clean up rates, okay? That's a great organization.
Dedication at that time was amazing. I know my own cousin David delivered it his house.
Well, in fact, David worked with Marcos.
Yeah, no, because he told me I was going to Boston and work. They had to call him up to remind him to cash his check because they got a check for $5, I think, a week or something like that. And he forgot to cash his check. And I'm like, hey, it's going to throw our banking off. Cash your $5 a week check, please. He was too busy to cash his check. That's the amount of dedication that I saw in people. And that kind of work, going to Boston like that. Also what's great is you and Cesar both believe, really, like you said, the power's in you. The power's in you. And I know Cesar did a thing where he was, at one point he was organizing, but he wanted people to do the contracts, to really do this. And they didn't have anyone, so he started training people to negotiate. And so that's what I think is amazing, to put the power on, to give the power to other people, to empower them. That's what you've done so well.
Well, that's what organizing is about. Organizing is about teaching other people that they have power and that they can make the difference. And also for people to understand that if we don't, we don't stand up, if we don't engage, if we don't make those changes, it's never going to change. We can't wait for somebody to come and do it for us. We've got to understand that we've got to do it for ourselves. And I think that we have seen that manifested. If we think of course, the farm worker movement, the dreamers, we've seen all the protests that have happened recently. So I think people are catching on to that. But also when we think about marching is good and protests are good, but you've got to come back to basic organizing. Something that will continue after the march is over and after the protest is over. So that's very important. That we have to build organization and always keep bringing in new people.
It's the day-to-day. It's setting up that day-to-day. It's not the exciting part. It's like people look at Hollywood.
Right.
It's the red carpet looks exciting, but the rest of the stuff is just day-to-day. What you do to live and survive and build a future for yourself. I think that's important. I mean, what you've also done, which is great, is you've given a voice to people that don't have a voice. But at the same time, you also gave them a chance to speak for themselves.
I was going to say, actually what you're doing is you're giving them, the power to use their own voice. And that's how the leadership develops. Not by you doing something for people, but for showing them how they can do it for themselves.
I love that because you're saying the cavalry's not coming. You're the cavalry. So that's a good thing for anyone to know. You're the cavalry. You're the solution. And which I think is so good what you're doing. Take me back to time because you have seen violence. You were at the assassination of Robert Kennedy. Can you tell me what that was like at that time, to have been a part of even that era? to watch that?
Well, we saw a lot of violence in the strike. I mean, when the strike first broke out, the Filipinos were the first ones that went out on strike, and we had to support them. And there was a lot of violence against the Filipinos. Some of them were beaten up by the growers, and they lived in the labor camps. They turned off the gas, they turned off the water, they turned off the lights, so that they couldn't even cook for themselves. And many of them, these labor camps were way outside of town. So we saw that violence against them, and then violence against some of the strikers. And then, of course, we had people in the farmers movement that were killed.
Yeah.
And actually, our first martyr was a young Jewish girl named Anne Freeman. She was killed in Boston. When she was from Boston, she was killed in Florida in a strike there. There was a strike in the sugarcane fields. And there were African-American workers, Jamaican, Mexican workers, and the truck ran her down and killed her on that picket line. And our second martyr was a young Arab named Najib Afada, and he was killed in Lamont, California by a Shur who hit him in the back of the neck with a big flashlight. He was a very slight person, and then they dragged him along the curbs of the sidewalk, hitting his head, and then he died of a concussion. And he was the second one. Then our third one was Juan de la Cruz, who was actually on the picket line, and a labor contractor came by and shot him in the heart. And then another one, Rufino Contreras, in Imperial Valley, when he went into the field, and the grower, a guy named Saikon, and actually they bought the guns and they bought the bullets for the strike breakers to shoot at the strikers if they came into the fields. And so he was met with a hail of almost 80 bullets.
80 bullets.
80 bullets. And then our last one was Rene Lopez, a young 19-year-old farm worker who organized it was a dairy farm there in Carruthers to vote for the union. And they won the election, this is after the law was passed, but we had the right to organize. And after the election, they called Rene over, and he went to the window of the car, and they pulled out a gun and they shot him in the temple. And he was killed instantly. So we've seen all of that violence. But the one great thing about Cesar is that he was so adamant that the union should continue to work without violence. Mm-hmm. And he made it, and Marcos, of course, was there with us when he made everybody take a standing vow. And Cesar always said, if we start using violence against the growers or the labor contractors, then we will start using violence against each other.
Yeah.
And there were some movements in other parts during that period of time where people were using violence, and that's exactly what happened. Many of them were killed.
So it was what do you think inspired him so much about nonviolence?
It was Gandhi.
Gandhi.
He read Gandhi, and he really wanted to follow those philosophies of Gandhi. And of course, his fast that he did, the fast that he did his 25-day fast in 1968, one in 1972, and then the 36-day fast for pesticides. So that was Caesar's way. And he didn't call them, people call them hunger strikes. He never called them a hunger strike. He said it was a fast, because he wanted to be a spiritual offering.
It is. Plus, he always had the Virgin of Guadalupe in front of the marches, and he came from a deeply religious background. You, with your mother, came from a deeply religious background. And in that religious background, St. Francis, all this, it is about helping the poor. It is about compassion. It is about, helping the immigrant coming to the country. All the good things that, we all believe in. This current world we're in right now, the current time we see right now, and I'm sure for you, as most of us, it's surprising. How do you feel looking at where you've been and where this country is now? Where do you think it's going?
Well, I think that we have some challenging times, but I like to remind people, and I know many in the audience here, they went through this back in the 60s and the 70s, and when we did the strikes and we did the boycotts. But we had Nixon as president of the United States.
Yeah, who was under investigation at the time. Why?
Yeah. And he was very much against the farm workers, and very much against the Great Boycott. We had the Vietnam War. Young people were killed, like at Kent State. There was a lot of protesting going on then during that period of time.
And Richard Nixon was against the press too. He was just the press.
Yeah, he was like a lot of oppression at that time. But what happened, I think, during that period of time. We had the civil rights movement that was going on with Dr. Martin Luther King. You had the feminist movement going on, where women were starting to get together for what was called the second wave of the feminist movement. Mm-hmm. You had the LGBT movement, the gay movement that was just starting. And you had the environmental movement that was just starting, And of course the Chicano movement that was coming out of that, alive at that time. And what happened, if we look back and then we see all of the things that we gained,
Yeah.
In spite of all of the oppression from Richard Nixon and Ronald Reagan and the governor of California, and then,
Steve Wilson,
yeah,
Prophet Ye.
yeah, we came out a lot stronger. And I think the same thing's going to happen now, because I think everybody realizes that each one of us has to do something. We
Yeah.
can't sit back and just, moan and be in despair. All of us have to get engaged, and especially we've got to get people off the boat.